welcome to Rock Paper Shotgun. My name is Colin Mahern and I'm quite positive about the future of strategy games. For a time it looked as though the genre had sunk into a kind of deathly malaise, but fast forward to now and things have never looked healthier. Whether you want to conquer the depths of space, wage historical warfare, or hulk around in big mechanical robots, there's a strategy game out there for you. But to save you time, we've compiled this list of the 12 very best. If at the end of this video you find that your fave didn't get a mention, then be sure to look at our full list of the 50 best strategy games on PC on rockpapershotgun.com. It might be on there. If it's not, then tell us about your favourite in the comments section. Maybe you'll convince others and us to give it a go. So let's get into it. Here are the top 12 strategy games to play on PC as selected by all of us at Rock Paper Shotgun. StarCraft 2 is the platonic ideal of the micro-heavy multiplayer RTS game. Watching expert players at work is bewildering as the clicks per minute rise and the whole game falls into strange and sometimes unreadable patterns. According to the StarCraft wiki, a proficient player can perform approximately 150 productive actions per minute. Now, you may be thinking, but I usually only click my mouse 150 times a year unless I'm photoshopping bees onto a picture of a politician's face. Well, fear not. StarCraft 2 may be included here because it has perfected an art form that only a dedicated few can truly appreciate, but its campaigns contain a bold variety of missions and bucket loads of enjoyably daft lore. Though its dour single-player campaign is a big ol' nope in terms of storytelling, the Legacy of the Void expansion has an Archon mode that even offers two-player co-op, so you can share all of those actions per minute with a chum. Double APM is always the better APM. For all the praise heaped on Total War Shogun 2 and Three Kingdoms, there's one thing they seriously lack: monsters. Total War Warhammer 2, however, solves the series' vitamin M deficiency with aplomb. Technically, this game is more like an absolutely titanic piece of DLC for the original Total War Warhammer than an actual sequel. While it has its own set of factions and its own campaign map, its true glory is arguably in its Mortal Empires campaign, which mashes together the maps and faction sets for both games for a beautifully bloated experience. It's worth the asking price for that alone, as well as adding a bewildering variety of fantastical unit types, from dragons to giant spiders and towering undead crabs. Warhammers 1 and 2 fundamentally changed the dynamics of the battlefield from their historical stablemates. Hero units are of dramatic importance to armies, capable of holding their own against hundreds of bog-standard troops, while a robustly designed magic system allows for game-changing battlefield effects to be deployed, at the cost of yet more micromanagement. Given the massive differences between factions, the game arguably offers much greater replayability than any others in the series, although that's arguably of little interest to players who come to Total War in search of realism. But monsters! For a while now, the RTS genre has been in a strange state of undeath, with a slew of titles from the golden age of the late 90s, early 2000s being resurrected to walk the earth again in search of the much coveted nostalgia dollar. And one of the very best is Age of Empires 2 Definitive Edition. To many, the original Age of Empires 2 was the pinnacle of the 2D isometric-ish gather and mangle format. It was superbly balanced, perfectly paced, and offered just the right mix of economic and military play. It had a terrific scenario editor built in, a great soundtrack, and a colourful medieval aesthetic that aged at least as well as StarCraft's. Definitive Edition, however, is more than just AoE 2's glammed up zombie. It's a giant sexy Frankenstein with the contents of 5 separate expansions and a whole castle full of brand new content sewn onto the body of the original game. All this, on top of UI and control improvements, very much resulted in the Definitive Edition of Ensemble Studios RTS. But then I suppose the clue was in the name. With its focus on just a few controllable units making for scenes of incredible tension, Invisible, Inc. is one of the greatest tactical games ever made. It's the kind of game where you throw your hands in the air at the start of a turn, convinced that all is lost, and then map out a perfect plan 10 minutes later. The reinvention of the familiar sneaking and stealing genre as a game of turn-based tactics deserves a medal for outstanding bravery. Everything from the brief campaign structure to the heavily customizable playstyles has been designed to encourage experimentation. This is a game which believes that information is power, and the screen will tell you everything you need to know to survive. The genius of Invisible, Inc. is that it creates such drama within its infinite procedural environments, which adjust themselves according to your personal desires. Even with games like Don't Starve and Mark of the Ninja in their back catalogue, you could easily say that Invisible, Inc. is Clay Entertainment's best. The spiritual successor to Total Annihilation is pure spectacle, and bigger. Quite a bit bigger, actually. But if that's all Supreme Commander had, then it wouldn't make this list. There's plenty of strategic depth behind the blockbuster bot battles. Supreme Commander Forged Alliance is a game in which the best players form their own flexible end goals, rather than simply rushing to the top of the ladder. Yes, there's a drive toward bigger and better units, but the routes to victory are many. Some involve amphibious tanks, and others involve enormous experimental assault bots and their ghostly residual energy signatures. We recommend this standalone expansion over the base game because of the extra units, an entirely new faction, new maps, and a new single-player campaign. All told, it's a better sequel than the actual sequel. It's very easy to dismiss the value of incremental improvements. We're all drawn to the flashy and the new, to innovations that light the touch paper of change. Now, Civilization 6 isn't a huge leap forward for the series, but a forward step or two still make it the best one yet. The old draw is still there. You get to take a nation from conception to robot-aided world domination. Win the space race, infect the world with your culture, press gang the UN, get nuked by Gandhi. It's a marriage of scope and personality that surpasses most games' attempts at either. Civ 6 funnels that grand strategy through smaller milestones. You might reach a new continent to boost research speed for a key technology, or focus on winning round the city-state with a few well-placed envoys. City planning matters more, thanks to specialised districts with adjacency bonuses. It's pleasingly grounding, a way of chipping away at that layer of abstraction while adding another welcome layer of strategy. It refines ideas the series has been playing around with for decades. No one change is revolutionary, and nor is their cumulative impact, but they still make it the best Civ by far. And, as we all know, Civ games are fantastic. Paradox's first foray into galactic scale 4X had a bit of a rocky start in life, but a slew of big updates and even bigger DLC expansions has seen Stellaris continue to evolve into something far more impressive. And, most importantly, more varied than it once was. Paradox often sticks with its games for the long haul, as we've seen with the likes of Crusader Kings 2 and Cities Skylines, but so far it's Stellaris that has benefited most from this approach. Whole systems have been ripped out and replaced in the name of slicker and smarter galactic empire building. Its tussle of space civilizations is now vast and strange. All gene wars and synth rebellions, alongside the more expected likes of imperialistic aliens. And it's a whole lot better set up for pacifistic play than it once was too. Oh, this empire has very much struck back. Alpha Centauri is not only one of the greatest 4X strategy games in existence, it's also one of the greatest sci-fi games. No video game before or since has managed to construct a strong authored narrative that takes place between and behind the turn-by-turn systems at play. It is a complete thing and several grades above the usual space opera hokum. It could have been a reskin, Civilization 3 in all but name. But Alpha Centauri radically rethinks the basic building blocks of 4X gaming, beginning with the planet itself. Discarding the idea of terrain types, Firaxis created a procedural system that mapped contours and climate to create believable hills and valleys, along with the water that flows across them. As the game continues, it seems that the process of colonizing is a reversal of civilization, in which fertile plains become industrial scars. You're creating a paradise rather than working one into destruction. Of course, that's not the whole story. There was already life on this new planet after all, and there's still life in Alpha Centauri and will be for decades to come. Crusader Kings games are strategy RPG hybrids, and what that means is that while you'll spend time commanding troops and conquering territory, you'll also fret about the day-to-day life of the ruler you're controlling. Amongst many things, you have to worry about what charmless idiot your daughter is going to marry. The stakes of these family dramas are every bit as important as your southern front, because when your ruler does eventually collapse in the throne room, you'll assume control of their heir, and have to live on with all the consequences of the deceased's actions. It's therefore a grand strategy game whose systems create real stories, because they're about people rather than about flanking maneuvers. The same was true of previous games in the series, but Crusader Kings 3's greatest victory is in refining the interface so you can focus on those characters more than the numbers that underpin them. Information is just where you need it and easily ignored when you don't. And it's not bad to look at, which is pretty important because you're going to spend a lot of time staring at menus in this game. XCOM 2, together with its equally excellent expansion War of the Chosen, is one of the finest strategy games of all time. And it's made all the more remarkable by how different it becomes when you include that aforementioned expansion. War of the Chosen is the super heroic cheese to XCOM 2's guerrilla tactics chalk. Where XCOM takes a country walk away from the expansive tactical complexity of the original 90s XCOM, War of the Chosen sprints full pelt into another continent. Your best soldiers will not be merely skilled in the use of weapons, they will become the weapons, the Avengers, capable of the most absurd feats of sci-fi heroism. Better still, the base/strategy layer breaks the chokehold of both XCOM and XCOM 2's single golden path of upgrades, allowing multiple different ways of staving off a slow death by resource drain. It is, admittedly, very, very silly. It attempts to maintain about 9 different tones at once. That harlequin nature is part of the charm, though. Games offer the fantasy of being a roguish spaceship pilot, but a childhood spent watching Star Trek might leave you with different life goals. A fantasy in which there are enemies on the view screen, fires in the engine room, and your survival is reliant on a mysterious alien passenger you picked up at the last planet you visited. FTL revels in creating science fiction scenarios like this. In this roguelike, where you control small spaceships and a crew from a top-down perspective, you're flying at light speed across the galaxy to evade an approaching deadly force, and you must make decisions about where to visit, how long to linger in each sector, and what items to trade. You can try going to an area with slavers, hoping to rescue some folks and gain new crew members, but there is always the risk you'll be blown up and lose everything. Or it could be a success and you're the hero, until you realise that your engines were damaged in the fight and now you need to send one of your crew members down into the engine room to repair the engines. Effectively, you're signing their death warrant. But you know, needs must. FTL generates these dramatic moments with ease. Plus, it's easy to pick up, it runs on practically anything, and there's enough variety here to keep you entertained for years. A true masterpiece. This turn-based mechs vs Giganto Beasts game was the perfect follow-up to FTL for developer subset games. Into the Breach throws out every milliliter of superfluous strategy bathwater without losing even a single bit of baby in the process. It asks you to focus only on the most immediate problem to hand. Your guys are here, the acid-spitting enemy is there, and oh, what's that? A skyscraper full of helpless civilians. What are you going to do, Hotshot? Every single action counts in Into the Breach. Failing to do something useful with one of your 3 units almost always spells doom. It wrings high drama out of every movement, and it does so while having the confidence to leave your imagination fill in the gaps left by its minimally animated presentation. To show anything else would take time, and taking time would only make it baggy. And it is precisely because Into the Breach is not baggy in the slightest that it feels like such an incredible turn-based strategy game. An instant classic when it launched in 2018, mainly because it doesn't use up any time trying to tell you how good it is. It just gets on with the job. If at this point in the video you're wondering where your fave is, then check out RPS's full list of the best strategy games to play on PC on rockpapershotgun.com. You might find that your favourite actually did make the cut. If it didn't, then why not leave a comment championing the strategy game you love more than any other? We love to celebrate great games, so we'd be happy to hear about the strategy game you hold dear. Thanks very much for watching, you absolute star, and remember, for all of your PC gaming needs, keep it on rockpapershotgun.com.